much faith and too much self-control. Them big, big man, but them feel real small. Cost a long reflection, but them 2 feet tall. Smoke and mirrors. Just smoke and mirrors. We feel real strong, yes, we feel real blessed. Our love for Jah like a shield on our chest. Them living real high, but them feel real low. Up at the top and got nowhere to go. Oh, oh, oh. Smoke and mirrors. See, we're living in this digital age, trapped like rats in an invisible maze. All of this in ancient Babylonian plan to rule you with technology no one understands. First thing first is your freedom of speech. Next thing them one time their guns out of reach. Third thing them take is total control. The last thing them need is your return soul. Rain hell fire upon them. We never let them build this Babylon up again. We save all overseas after the school system. Raise some under Jah family tradition. American Rasta, fight if we have to. Carry no chains and abide by no masters. Seen a few kingdoms crumble in our path. High and higher live free or die. Oh, yes, Jah. Too much love, too much soul, too much faith and too much self-control. Them big, big man, but them feel real small. Cost a long reflection, but them 2 feet tall. Smoke and mirrors. Just smoke and mirrors. We feel real strong, yes, we feel real blessed. Our love for Jah like a shield on our chest. Them living real high, but them feel real low. Up at the top and got nowhere to go. Oh, oh, oh. Smoke and mirrors. It's just smoke.
It starts with a simple question and ends in objective reality. Through our journey from there to here, we find one another and ourselves. And as the next 24 hours breaks free from our last, we gaze onward in reflection of the day.
Come to your own conclusions. Stay vigilant.
Welcome to the Daily Wrap-Up.
Thursday, August 27th, 2026. Thank you for joining me today. Focusing largely on Donald Trump's recent executive order that ties in with some stuff we've been talking about pretty in depth for quite a long time. I want to start with a few updates, actually, just to get some stuff, a couple different things I want to get out there. And then we're pretty much going to dive right into some precursor stories that very much relate to the larger conversation. And this just out of the gate has to do with an executive order discussing bulk equipment being used in regard to the control grid, what they refer to as, infrastructure, and the idea of AI and data centers. And interestingly, making sure, there's no backdoors, no cybersecurity issues, and then absolutely leaving out the number one culprit of those things in the world. Now, it's not just about Israel, obviously, but I think this specifically has to do with hiding behind legislation what is already going on. And I think that's very important. And so we're going to have a few, actually, I'm going to play this clip, something we played before, right out of the gate that I want you to see. Oh, actually, before I get into that, I want to start with that. Announcements I want to put out there really quickly. First, this is the what I was playing to start. Somebody reached out to me and said that they liked this and wanted it's something. It's Venice Beach Dub Club, Smoke and Mirrors, and not something they necessarily did themselves, but just really liked it and resonated with them during COVID-19 timeframe. And interestingly, had a great story about how he moved to Big Island. I lived in Oahu for 2 years and ultimately went there with the Question of Everything t-shirt on, went on the Big Island and had just gotten there, was walking into a store and someone's like, oh, TLAV, that's my guy or something like that. I just thought that was pretty cool just to know that we're reaching people around the world, but maybe they know me from living there. But either way, you want some music to play, reach out. Can't promise it'll happen. I'd like to get some people personal music. I've already got a few people that have reached out, so can't promise it'll happen, but reach out if you'd like to try. I'd like to keep that going. I just like giving a shout out to good music and then just to play something while waiting. A quick update in general for those that have been following what I'm dealing with off the show. Unfortunately, my father is now back in the hospital. He might actually be coming back home again today, but just generally speaking, it's not looking too good with where it's going. They still have no idea with what's going on. We're trying to find some kind of a specialist, at the very least in GI, but more so sort of immune and possibly vaccine injury direction. And it's just kind of in this kind of holding pattern where nobody knows what to do next. They're talking about more surgery. None of us want that. We don't even know what that's going to solve. And just, let you guys know it's not looking good, but we're still trying to stay positive and we're trying to find another avenue. I have gotten a lot of good information from you guys. One person, somebody sent, I actually reached out to, didn't work out, but thank you for everybody reaching out and sending kind words and information that might help. And, just as this and multiple things are happening, just bear with me. I'll do my best to get content out as much as I can, but time is a little scattered right now. But other than that, I also wanted to shout out the store that we have for those that want to continue to support this platform in the beginning, as opposed to what I say at the end sometimes. This is the clothing store that we have now. And the title is, or rather the URL is tlavonlinestore.itemorder.com. And the other store we had is, I think, still active, selling some discounted stuff. I don't know if that's even still up or if just they didn't take it down. But either way, that doesn't support TLAV at this point. So if you'd like to support us and you want to get the content and some newer ones he added here as well, check it out from Big Frog. Good people. One last thing to get into, as I was setting up today, and this is interestingly relevant to the kind of tech side of things. Not that this is a huge platform that I lean into or there's tons of them out there, but two things, both MeWe.com, which some people out there like, and it's a somewhat reasonable platform, as well as Memo. I think it's .com or let me just double check so I have it right. .cash. Memo.cash and MeWe.com. Now, first of all, MeWe.com suddenly sent this today. MeWe is for adults and verified teens only. A quick check with our trusted partner, KID, which I didn't look into. I'm willing to bet you it'll have things that'll make me unhappy. Not aside from this in general, choose a face scan or an ID document, whatever you prefer. Now, this is what's crazy to me is even as of right now, and I know some people have, I guess, been forced to comply or for other reasons got tricked into using the, I'm blanking on the name all of a sudden, Authentics, which Twitter was using. A lot of us, I've yet to never do anything beyond what I originally did to sign up all those years ago. My ID, whatever else it originally was. I've never been asked to add anything else. And as I've said, if they try to ask you to scan your face, I'm not going to do it, even if that loses access to these platforms. And so the point is, this is what's happening with MeWe. And so it's telling you to scan your face. And so I think it's important that we acknowledge where this is going. And they're literally undercutting their own audience. To what? To, pretend to protect the children, which is not what this is really about. I don't know. That's very frustrating. So I removed it from my tags and it's no longer listed under the website. Won't be using it anymore. And this one was interesting because not a lot of people use this or know about it necessarily, but this is something I'd used on the side for a long time. It's sort of like a Bitcoin-based side, memo.cash it was called. And I posted everything on this for the longest time. Now, I'm not to go and log in. I already logged out, but there was, I don't know, tons of Satoshis. That's how it listed at the top, like 1 million plus Satoshis, which is not that much money, but it's been building and building and building. I show up just the other day and it's zeroed out. And I said, add some more money to keep acting. And I said, okay, great. Yet another platform, whatever it was, glitch or not, that's just there. That's how this works, guys. There's so many out there. I'm not saying they're all dishonest, but it's unfortunate that we have to go through that. So just wanted you to know what I was dealing with on some of the other platforms and hold their feet to the fire on Rumble and all the rest, guys, because it's the same problem. Truly is. If you really understand where Rumble is now, it is YouTube. It is a YouTube 2.0, just like the other ones. Now, to get into this, ultimately, even these first couple of topics, you're going to see how much this relates to the larger conversation. And that specifically is this executive order, declaring a national emergency to secure the United States bulk power system. And as I put in the title, it very clearly, it doesn't state what countries are or not included, but as we read through specifically what they frame as the entity to be, it clearly boxes out groups like Israel. And if you dive in further, it's very clear. Even the articles writing about it, that is obviously not what this is aimed at. I find that to be almost insulting, and it's pretty crazy. Now, but I wanted to make a quick note about this as well. We even, as you guys know, we started the open source podcast for Unlimited Hangout, Derek and myself, at Whitney's request. Now, some people, I guess, have been reaching out to them in case I didn't make this clear. These are not going to be flying off the shelves right now. It's not going to be coming to you right away. Whitney plans on, I think, putting the first one out next week, I think, and this is after some of the things they had planned. Remember, these are basically I shouldn't say deep dives because we're trying to make them under an hour so you can do that instead of read it, but an in-depth discussion of the article as opposed to reading it, of things they've posted already. So it's not like it's a time-sensitive conversation. So I just want to make sure those out there know that on our community over here, and there's a lot of overlap, that this posted in the first one, that's first of all going to be a minute whenever they decide, but it's their prerogative, right? So don't be hounding them about getting this out. It'll come, and I'll promote it when it comes out. And we're on episode 2 already, so there's going to be more coming your way. But just, I guess somebody reached out to them going like, why aren't you releasing this content? And I just want to make sure you guys know that this is something that it's, paced on purpose. And so that's up to Whitney and her team to decide how that comes out. And so just look forward to it. They'll be coming out soon. The first one was on the specifically the sustainable development goals. I believe it was number 16, but it had to do with the idea of global government. And it's very relevant today. And of course, we did number 2 specifically on an article they covered on TOCA. Now that's going to be relevant in the conversation today. So what we do in this is specifically going down like the article itself and Derek and I discussing the points on it. Now I'm going to be including her article today, but it's a larger conversation about the one part of TOCA, but just in general, how all this affects you. And we've been talking about this day in and day out for like the last weeks. I mean, for a long time before that, but specifically because of recent actions from Trump, one of which was making it more difficult. I think it's this one. No, I'm going to make a couple updates on these in a second. This one here. Makes it easier for foreign governments to secretly operate U.S. companies. Now, this was another executive order, which simply put, not to use the terms they use, but just so it's easy to understand, they make it so you do not have to divulge the real money backer of a company. And even not just money, but being involved with the company. But I forget the term they use, but people can literally, as it's discussed even in the corporate media, China, Russia, if you will, or anybody else, could create companies in this country and never have to divulge that they were actually run from a foreign company, and they could present themselves as U.S. companies. There's an example like that in here today, which we've talked about before. And in fact, this is Vectis Air Systems, I believe, and plenty of others where they're sort of creating themselves as something else, or Comframe that we've talked about. But I digress. We're going to get to the points, just briefly overview again. But the large point is about this executive order from 2 days ago, and what this opens the door to, or what it ignores. So first, and again, you'll see how these connect for interesting. Actually, I take that back. This one I just wanted to point this out to start. I thought this was interesting, and I know I wasn't even going to get into the whole Lake Ontario, the Lake America. I genuinely think these things are just meant to get people talking about literally anything but Trump embarrassing himself, which is funny because he's embarrassing himself with that story. But you see, I honestly think it's to making himself look bad to make sure you don't notice all of the either more embarrassing stories or literal criminal activity. Who knows if it's a conscious act by him or not? It's pretty sad. Even people supporting him are kind of cringing at what he's doing. But here's what I thought was funny, because this is what you're getting on half the story. Is, oh, well, he's just trolling you. Haven't we Greenland? I mean, for crying out loud, I could go down a list of 14 things that people were like, oh, you're falling for the troll, until it was an executive order, until it was happening. And then those same people were going, yay, we did it. It's like, wait, I thought it was a joke. But see, those are the ones that will cheer whatever he'll yell loudly. And it's the best thing I ever heard in my life. So in this case, I thought it was funny that Glenn Beck came out, and it was a very quick part right in the beginning, said this.
I kind of feel sorry for Canadians because they're not in on the joke. And then again, I kind of feel sorry for us because we may not be in on the joke either.
Okay, simple point, and you can listen through it. The whole idea is that it's sort of like there's some kind of secondary motive here, and there's a deeper play, or he's just trolling you. And so what was funny about this is he, after posting that, which was the video of Trump on Lake Ontario and Lake America is with a Sharpie, is top tier trolling, and it looks like Ottawa is taking the bait. Oh, it's fake, is it? Oh, update next day. Lake America troll just became an executive order. So it wasn't a troll then? I'm surprised he didn't delete the video, right? But see, this is what I think is hilarious about this is so, what a good parallel is? Data Republicans being given information and thinking that she was being set up by her own team because this is how, and that's not something you should ignore. Obviously, that's a possibility. Or in this case, obviously, it's possible that Trump is just lying because he wants to make a certain thing happen, or because he wants to, distract you, or it's a troll. But what's funny is that he looks at this and goes, oh, there's some deep plan. Nope, Trump just wanted the lake. I want Lake America. Or he wanted to use it to, whatever. But the point is that he talks about it as if he's somehow on the inside. Alex's big stories coming. And then it's just exactly what it looks like. So that's just very embarrassing. And what does that mean? Was he meant to make you think it was fake or was he just trying to tail along and get it? I don't know. Frankly, I don't care. These people are largely more irrelevant as the days go on. They're kind of dying media types. But I still found it interesting that this is the kind of way you get to these stories. Now, the whole story itself, I mean, like I already addressed, it seems irrelevant, frankly, because it doesn't change anything. Trump signs order to rename Lake Ontario Lake America amid Canada trade war. So you can decide if you think, honestly, even if there's something like legitimately he's doing this and writing some legislation and they're going to put through, what does it change? Ask yourself that and ask yourself why it matters and why everyone wants to comment on it. Again, the only reason I brought it up was because I saw the point of him kind of stupidly expressing that it wasn't a troll after realizing that he did an executive order. To me, that's relevant with these kind of people. That's like, corporate media in the same way, and what that means about how they cover this stuff. Now, on a larger point on just the corporate media, the same ones that were telling you about how we have to care about what's going on in stories like the Epstein files. Well, Dr. Simon points out, 4 months later, the Epstein files still have vanished from the conversation. As if, and by the way, it hasn't. Not in our conversations, not in real people's conversations, not in the conversations of literally the majority of this country, but weirdly in the conversations of the corporate media and the mainstream alternative media, left and right. How do you not see how clear that is? That is the fake conversation right there. Now, there's a lot of people that are involved in that, who like what they say about this topic or that, or maybe think but at the end of the day, we all see that. The people that literally held the binders and most transparent, walking out, libs of TikTok and GC Drano, they don't even mention Epstein's name anymore. I just think that's very clear. But he's right. As if one of the biggest scandals in America and Israeli politics just never happened. And you know what that really shows you? And this is why it does, in fact, this part does connect to the larger conversation. It didn't stop. It didn't just never, like it never happened, vanished. It never stopped. That's why I think this was meant to, he was an asset. He was not the one running this. Clearly, if it was for a larger intelligence apparatus, he's one apparatus or one asset again, one intelligence agent or somebody working for them, however you look at it. And so this relates to the blackmail network. And you know how you get that blackmail? Spyware. And that's everything we're talking about largely over the last couple of shows, in fact, because this is becoming more and more relevant every single day. Now, a couple of quick overlapping points that do largely relate as we go through. On the beef part quickly, I thought was relevant, just to update in case you hadn't seen it, the whole mystery beef conversation. This was the show we talked about it on August 22nd. And in case you didn't see, I thought it was interesting that suddenly there's meat being recalled, but it wasn't new necessarily. It's kind of an ongoing issue with Argentina, but I found it interesting. And this is beefmaps.com. And this is just the larger beef rancher community. And make note of the ones who made a big point to come out and be like, Trump's right. I'm a rancher and they're right. They're wrong, guys. either they don't understand their own business or they're lying for Trump. I don't know how that can't be seen. And so there's a lot of the honest ranching community, including ones that support Trump, who came out and said, that's a bad move. And this is obvious to anybody who's not a blind supporter. This is not about supporting you. There's something else going on around this. I'm not really sure. There's a lot of different, Soylent Green and, Roish meat and all these different conversations that, who knows? But at the end of the day, it's something could just be about making money in their own right and making it look like they're doing something for you. But Trump signed it anyway. It says every cattle group in America said don't. All of them reached out. And he said he did it. 300,000 metric tons of tariff-free foreign beef through the same 4 packers who control 85% of slaughter. Ranchers lost today. Like, that's a centralization of the food supply, the food chain. Think about what we said during COVID, the breakdown of, the choke points of the food issue. That's exactly what he's doing. Now, if Biden did it, would you care more? That doesn't make any sense. It's the same problem. And as Daniel McAdams says, just like Tulsi told him not to attack Iran, point is, Trump doesn't care. Rather, he has a different agenda than what you may think is in the interest of Americans. Now, this is also happening as of, interestingly, 27th. USDA recalls 30,000, not 300,000, 30,000. That's getting a little conflation online, of Argentine beef sold in Texas and Florida. Now, this has happened. We've already talked about this, but it's not unique. This is an ongoing problem for Argentina. And that's why a lot of people were saying, is that the meat that he's going to use? Don't forget, there's an overlap here when it comes to the, larger kind of even network state Israel conversation, Elon Musk and Argentina and their political fake libertarianism. Like, there's an ongoing sort of association there that's more than just politics. And so you wonder if there's something deeper there when it comes to we're not going to get in other than some side points to the kind of transition of authority, network state agenda point. But I do think that's relevant to Argentina, to El Salvador, plenty of others. Anyway, the point simply was that this got recalled. And it's amazing that this is even something they're still trying to associate with. But anyway, the point wasn't to get into this in depth, but just simply to point out that it was recalled and to highlight for you that on the 26th, the actual executive order further ensuring affordable beef for the American consumer made it clear that the first tranche of the 100,000 will open on September 1st. So technically speaking, that meat that he's talking about wouldn't even be in the United States until after the 1st. But who knows? Maybe they're lying about everything all the time, which is pretty common. I just want to make sure people see that. So, the worry being that there's not something already floating and, but again, who knows what they would be honest about. Now, secondarily, I thought it was interesting to consider that, one thing I hadn't brought up was the lab grown meat part of this. It's weird that people choose to kind of like mentally go, well, that's a Democrat. It's not really, guys. It's not. I mean, if you understand that all of these agendas are not unique to left and right, then you'll under the lab grown meat, the WEF, World Economic Forum, UN larger agendas we talked about during COVID. These are all still ongoing through Trump's administration. He's just trying to wrangle them in his own direction for his own benefit. But the lab grown meat part of this, with Bill Gates, who's now very close to Trump and all of this, is interesting to think about. And it's more than just Bill Gates, and whether that might be playing a factor. And maybe that might be rolling its way into the food industry without us even knowing about it. Israel has what's it called? Israel's redefined meat serves up plant-based whole cuts of beef. Oh, don't even look at that. It's so disgusting. Not that is, more relevant than the U.S. I just think it's interesting that there is an ongoing issue, and anything Israel's involved in my opinion, right now, matters to me. You may find that to be crazy, like some admission of being subjective. It's not that I'm assuming anything. But I mean, guys, if there's a known murderer, if they're involved with anything, you're going to go, well, I don't know. That guy's not good. That guy shouldn't be involved with things. He's a bad guy. Why wouldn't you do the same for an open, like this? This government is proudly and screaming from the top of their lungs about all the things that you go down the list of foreign infiltration, genocide, torture, rape. These are things they're praising over there. Not every single Israeli, but very clearly. Literally, if we don't remember, fighting to maintain the ability to rape people in their prisons. Literally talking about it on their mainstream channels, defending why that should continue to happen. And we can't even have an honest conversation about that in this country. There's a quick overlapping point that relates to that in a second. And I'll also include this, vaccines to stop eating meat. Thought it was interesting. It popped up when I was searching for it. Oh, and by the way, 2023, the whole big tick bioweapons, vaccines to eat meat, the thing that, Alex and the rest lurch back into every 2 months because they want it to look new. Or suddenly geoengineering is a big topic we're going to do a whole focus on. Oh, good. Alex, keep distracting everybody from your failures. Obviously, it's an important conversation, but it's interesting that now is when they lurch into all these. You know how long they've been talking about the idea of this exact conversation of like invasive spyware and spying and control and such. And right now this is all spinning out. And that's what they're talking about. Very clear what's going on. Now, this is an interesting point I want to make too that relates to the surveillance through the COVID-19 timeframe. In case you did not see this, guys, I think this is important because I'm seeing far too many people fall for this account. In case you didn't notice, WikiLeaks is not WikiLeaks. It has about 15,000 followers, yet it's continuing to get posts that go pretty damn viral, if not millions of shares, because people think it's WikiLeaks. Now, and as all I said was for those that have not noticed, this is a malicious account trying to manipulate people. Now, that does not necessarily mean fake information. In almost every case, though, it's a limited, like it's a half-truth with a lot of fake information. So some of these things are somewhat accurate. Now, this one is, there is a patent. I do think this is relevant, actually. Now, we've actually talked about this one. This is from 2021. But so this is the post itself. Pfizer patent, so that's already false, by the way, granted in 2021, is for cellular tower communication with graphene-injected humans worldwide. Now, what's crazy about that is this patent is actually really important. And it speaks to something that I think literally was happening during COVID-19, at the very least was the plan and is going to be happening. I think it's both. But this is what I genuinely think this account is doing, or maybe just wanted to grift off something. And why lie about it then? Is I think this is about trying to take something that is relevant, if not about to be way more relevant, and mire it in some kind of half-truth. You know, turns the frogs gay kind of a point. Instead of acknowledging the endocrine disrupting chemicals coming from factories that were altering the makeup of our environment, which would have been important had we not mired it in frogs being gay. And everyone laughed at it and turned, well, everybody, but people that would have otherwise cared looked at that story and said, that's stupid. That's their fault, by the way, because it was a real story. But the question is, did he do that on purpose? Who knows? If he didn't, he still had the same effect. And so I wonder whether or not platforms or groups or anybody that does something like this is intending, you know, sort of like the died suddenly point that I make. Again, I don't know if that was designed. Maybe he got fed that by somebody who thinks is a source, which is somebody handling him, and said, put the quotes on it. It'll make it work better. And the whole point was about hiding the fact that when you search for died suddenly with quotes, it showed you the endless list of reports going, they died suddenly. Now what do you get? The ridiculous documentary that used a lot of fake things and misrepresented people. And yes, had some good information in it. The bottom line, though, back to this. This patent is real. It's entitled Methods and Systems of Prioritizing Treatments, Vaccination, Testing, and/or Activities While Protecting the Privacy of Individuals. Gotta love that. Now, as you can see, it's not Pfizer, which is clearly a choice, is why they made sure you did not really get the information of who was involved. So you must right there be aware this group chose to carve out the people involved so they could lie and say it was Pfizer. Get a lot of reach. So, granted, in 2021, here's what it says. Now, you will find this relevant. This is relevant. But what I'm seeing is like that kind of person doing that will get people to ignore stuff like this as if it's fake. Now, and also always remember, a patent's just a patent. Doesn't mean it exists. It means that somebody theoretically thought that it was possible, and then prove that through this process. But it doesn't necessarily mean it's there. I believe, though, that this is exactly what we're talking about. Something that's either already in use or something that is being worked on through all the stuff we're talking about. System and methods for anonymously selecting subjects for treatment against an infectious disease caused by a pathogen. Now, when they say anonymously, does that mean that you don't know, or does that mean that people don't know you're being chosen? It's a good question. The system comprises a plurality of electronic devices. Now, I want to be clear, by the way, we're talking about vaccination, and we'll get into one of those things below and some other aspects of this. But so that's why it's important to list such electronic devices, I skipped a part. System comprises a plurality of electronic devices comprising instructions to generate an ID, and when in proximity of another such electric device, one or both electric devices receive the ID from the other electronic device. Interesting. So it's like a secret digital ID system that tags based on when you bump up against each other, like those phone apps people were using by their own volition. Then a score is generated based on a plurality of such received IDs. Oh, so a credit score, if you will. A literal score based on whether or not you are complying with the criteria that are put in. You bump up against each other and you grade based on your current situation. Additionally, based on information received from a server, so their database at the central location, relevant treatment instructions are displayed to the subjects based on the received information. So that's where you get into the point of where those just benign, and maybe they think maybe it's designed that way, where we just go, oh, you came across that person who their digital device told my device they might be getting sick. So your instructions are to quickly rush to the hospital and be quarantined. That is what that actually is. And who knows, it could be used to go, hey, maybe, be safe, this person, and maybe you think it's a good, at the end of the day, we already see how the government will abuse this, if not designed in the way like I just described. And they think that's for your best interest. And it says, additionally, the server comprised instructions. Make sure I didn't miss that. Yeah, additionally, based on the information received from a server, relevant treatment instructions are displayed, received the information, and the score. The server comprises instructions for sending to the plurality of electronic devices the information to be displayed with the relevant treatment instructions. Additionally, the server and/or electronic devices comprise instructions to generate a prediction of likelihood of a subject transmitting the pathogen based on a score of the subject. Now, again, it could just be a tool that could be totally benign if you look at it that way. Or it could be used in a way that says, okay, well, we believe you might get sick for the safety of everybody. Just like with COVID-19 lie, they said you have to stay home. And if you don't, we're going to arrest you. Now you got flock cameras. Now you got, and you can see how easily, now this is just one idea. There's tons of these out there, guys. As I'll read another study I've pointed to before. But what I found relevant on this as well, which, by the way, if you read, there's some fact checks on this very patent, by the way, from like Lead Stories. And you got to love how in the first fact check, it says fake news, no mention of Pfizer. And they'd be wrong. And in fact, if you go down, it says correction. We missed the mention of Pfizer because they didn't do their due diligence. They said fake news because they didn't see it right there. Now, what you will find is that there's a Pfizer mention right down here. Now, just to be clear, I found this before I even found the Lead Stories point. Not that that matters, but you guys know, this is something it matters to me to do our due diligence. 28 candidate vaccines in clinical evaluation. Now, here's the thing: is this is being framed as this is part of this. Their argument is that it's not. This is just this patent listing relevant information of 28 candidate vaccines that are in evaluation, which they were at the time, that might apply. So you can decide whether I think that makes sense. And I think the point is they're simply highlighting the COVID-19 vaccines, which is important, just as relevant to me as perfect candidates for exactly what they're listing. Now, the question becomes, was that the case? Did that end up getting rolled in? Was that the Omicron variant? Who knows? I think it's obvious they're capable of doing stuff like that. It's obvious they're capable of lying to us about what they do. I mean, we all had all these anomalies. The magnet conversation, were these all lies? Some of it was. I'm convinced of that. In other cases, though, we know there's a relevant thing to be considered, considering the idea of the magnetogenetics and the conversation of that, or the overlap within the actual vaccination conversation, a number of things that made that not just possible, but even likely if that was being used. The point, though, is that all of this said and done, I think we know that they're capable of things like that they would hide from us that are, as a government. But overall, the reason I thought this was so interesting is we're talking about surveillance, right? We're talking about the idea of a potential secret implantation, some kind of tracking dynamic that can then be used to inform. But in this case, it's delivering your messages. So it's obviously not on the face about secret, but that's obviously just one quick change. Now, that's why, of course, this is yet again being brought up. And I haven't brought it up for a while. I mean, maybe on a side point I did. But for those that don't watch the show regularly, we talked about it a lot during COVID-19. This is only one of probably 10 of these I can find. January 2019. Now, this is where obviously this is what their mindset is if they were to do that secretly, which is compulsory moral bioenhancement should be covert, as it says, arguing that if moral bioenhancement ought to be compulsory. So if they rationalize that it should need to happen for the best interest of society, then of course its administration ought to be covert. So all they rationalize is that, well, if we're going to need to do it and you won't understand, then we should just do it without your knowledge. That's a literal peer-reviewed study argument. And it says, covert other than overt. And it says it is morally preferable for compulsory, forced moral bioenhancement to be administered without the recipients knowing that they're receiving the enhancement. If moral bioenhancement ought to be compulsory, so they make that choice, then its administration is a matter of public health based on their decision to call it that, of course. And for this reason, should be governed by public health ethics. Don't you love using ethics in a compulsory injection of any kind? And it goes on to say, I argue that the covert administration of a compulsory moral bioenhancement program better conforms to the public health ethics than does an overt compulsory. Okay, fine. I'll give you that. A forced public campaign is more consistent with ethics than well, I mean, don't agree with that. What they're trying to say is that doing it publicly and forcing it in your face is worse than doing it quietly. But why would quietly doing the same immoral thing be better ethical, more ethical rather? Promotes values such as liberty, utility, equality. I mean, these people just break their brains to comply with some kind of social point. At the end of the day, this is what they think in a large systematic sense. And I think we're starting to see that. So back to the point is, be careful of stuff like this, guys, because these people are not out to help you. And they're arguably trying to gaslight people around very important conversations that are likely happening already. Now, on that very note, to bring this further into the conversation of surveillance, as Whitney wrote in 2020 for The Last American Vagabond, Google and Oracle to monitor Americans who get Warp Speed's COVID-19 vaccine for up to 2 years. This got very quickly dropped, not in their sense, but in the conversation that's covering pharmacovigilance. That wasn't any of the databases we talked about. That was Moncef Slaoui and Trump, Oracle and Google doing their own monitoring. Now you ask, how do they do that? That is the question, isn't it? And that very patent becomes very relevant here. And please read these all again. Just quickly putting some pieces out. It says it was incredibly precise. This is Moncef Slaoui speaking with Wall Street Journal. Tracking systems. Incredibly precise tracking systems that will ensure that patients each get 2 doses of the same vaccine and to monitor them for adverse health effects. Yeah, you could argue that is, the system that keeps tallies of who's gotten what, or that it's, but that's a reach, because what they're saying is one location where all this is done. And he was very clear about this. The link to the Wall Street article is right there, Wall Street Journal. The New York Times published a separate interview with Slaoui when we referred to his tracking system as a very active pharmacovigilance surveillance system. It says, while Moncef Slaoui and Warp Speed documents provide few details regarding what this tracking system would entail, Slaoui did note in his recent interview with the Wall Street Journal that tech giants Google and Oracle, Larry Ellison, had been contracted to collect and track vaccine data as part of the system. So you got a private version of this. I don't think we've ever actually seen this information. You know why? Because it damn well proves that we're right. Now, under the title From the NSA to the FDA, the new PRISM, the Warp Speed document From the Factory to the Front Lines notes that the pharmacovigilance system will be a new system. So clearly that does not mean the VAERS and everything else. A new system created exclusively for Operation Warp Speed that will be built off of existing IT, information technology infrastructure, and will fill any gaps with new IT solutions. You tell me that doesn't align with exactly what we just read. It then notes that the COVID-19 vaccination program requires significant enhancement of the IT that will support enhancements and data exchange that are critical for a multi-dose candidate to ensure proper administration of a potential second dose. Because clearly they care about your safety and your health, right? So if you pluck out the obvious parts of the feigning support for your health when they're giving you deadly shots and just look at the parts that seem relevant, it's literally reading off what we just wrote. Now, that doesn't mean that it's the same thing, but I think it's relevant to the consideration that we're ongoing dealing with some kind of bio-internal surveillance, which is what DARPA's been working on for 20 years. And relating this back into the idea of surveillance, and not just internal, but in an all-encompassing sense. That's the idea of these like disparate sources that they're bringing into one focal point. That's what everyone's working on, Eric Prince and everybody else. And so guess what they also did with everything in your, government with the training of the AI models with Israel. Well, they removed all the silos, didn't they? They jammed it all into one place. No, same thing. I mean, it's so hard to miss what's happening right now if you're just barely paying attention. So, another overlap to this, which is continuing to be relevant before we get to the executive order. This one has to do with the idea of, actually, you know what? I feel maybe this one doesn't actually. Anyway, I'm screwing myself up. Anyway, an update on this has to do with the idea of the FBI manufacturing a plot. Jessica Bowie, literally dressing up in her ISIS uniform and going through Home Depot to check out for some bomb equipment, because that's just totally what people would do, And remember, the FBI drove her there, paid for it. I mean, literally everything. Gave her a fake gun, fake bomb, everything. And never dealt with ISIS, dealt with the FBI, pretending to be ISIS. So never talked to ISIS, didn't have any real bomb, not a real gun, didn't actually do. So ultimately being charged with material support for a terrorist organization because the FBI lied to her. And sure, you can argue that she did it, so she's a bad person. But did what? spoke to the FBI, didn't break a law. I mean, you explained to me how, even if you think she intended to, how that works out. Now, for those that don't want, who will always defend the FBI, you're not going to win. But anybody who's not completely, I mean, this is ridiculous. This is pre-crime in its most like early state. This is what they've always been doing. Add technological versions, which we're going into, Bill Barr forward. I mean, it's what we've been talking about a long time. But to quickly update on this topic, the whole idea that I talked about when this on top of the other parts of it were, is what about the idea of Israeli dressing up like Palestinians, or in general, just like the in a burqa of some kind, or different, dressing up like Hamas and pretending to be these, not just making it about Israeli, but anybody. The false flag dynamic. I just thought it was relevant to bring up this clip in that conversation. Men Press News, activists exposed an IDF soldier who was posing in a kippah at Columbia University. He was exposed as a sergeant that participated in the Gaza genocide. Look at that. And he admits to it on video and says, oh, well, I'm just trying to reach people and pretend that I'm, listen for yourself. So, maybe it's benign, probably not. I just think it's important to realize that this is common practice, and really on any side, which is always why it should be something we consider. But realize that, you got these people out there who, that very famous example that got all the attention during the midst of the, in the middle of the height of the ongoing Gaza genocide, where the woman in a kippah walked by and did the Nazi salute. And everyone in corporate media talked about it. None of them did is follow up when it got proven that she ran a Jewish cafe and she was actually Israeli. It's ridiculous, isn't it? And this constantly happens. And so when this guy comes out and punches somebody in the face and runs away, what happens? Media says, Palestinian terrorist, whatever. Remember how easy, and this is constant.
Yes. Is that your face? So you're a first sergeant IDF soldier, yeah?
I do.
Okay, so why are you protesting in here? Can you tell me?
I'll explain to you a little bit.
Okay, can you explain me a bit more?
Of course, I will explain. So basically, we're doing right now something that in the end, you see that when people come in and talking to these people, so they're not really listening to them.
So it's real quiet. His point is simply that, so they're coming and, they if I'm an Israeli and I go, hey, let me tell you why we're not murdering and raping children, they're not going to want to hear it. But if I dressed like a Palestinian and go, hey, let me tell you why Israel's not raping and killing children, they're going to be more open to it. Yeah, right. I mean, that's just the dumbest thing. Maybe he believes that. I mean, at the very least, they might be open in the moment to go, what do you have to say? But the moment you're going, that's why immediately people called him out, because it's obviously he's trying to manipulate guys. That's all this comes down to. It's not, there's no debating what that government is doing right now. The whole damn world knows what's happening. And so what you get is people trying to continue to gaslight and lie and cover up. Governments around the world are actively doing that right now, and it's not hard to see.
Okay.
So when I'm wearing a keffiyeh, I say that people listening to me, or it's the Palestinians, Hamas terrorists, instead of listening to the idea.
Okay, so what you're telling me is that you're posing as a Hamas soldier to get your message, an IDF message across?
Exactly.
Do you think it is moral to pose like that?
I think that in the end, if the other side is not listening,
Hi, I'm good. How are you?
if the other side...
Nice to meet you.
Just listen, they would hear. Well, it's not about just hearing you say that's not happening, because we know it's happening. Because you know why? We've watched the government laugh about it happening. We've watched Israeli military laugh about raping and murdering and stealing things from their homes. So you're not going to get any traction by going, that's not true. That, they human shields. No, sorry. I can break these things down for you all day. It's the cat's out of the bag, guys. And so but this is not about trying to influence people's opinions in my mind. Not even close. I could be wrong, of course. Maybe he thinks that'll have an effect. I just think it's obvious it's about something darker than that. And it's constantly happening. All the Columbia protests, this is what we were dealing with, guys. And it's not to say that you don't have the same thing in reverse. Being objective, I think it's obvious. And both sides would rationalize why doing the dishonest thing would be, is to expose the other side. Don't do that. Be the better person. Don't, the same thing our government does every day by doing the same thing back to them. Right? Cluster munitions, white phosphorus. Well, they did it. You're the same thing. Doing the same thing back doesn't give you the higher ground because they started it. The ends don't justify the means, ladies and gentlemen. So continuing on this point, this is where it rolls into the bigger conversation, because we keep getting points like this. ICE arrested an Israeli August 20th. named Avisha Alan, criminal illegal alien from Israel during targeted operation. Alan's criminal history includes conviction for criminal threat against person with deadly weapon. Now, what's funny is you have a group and an administration that will, I mean, in many cases where you don't even have evidence of it, but the illusion, the alluding to it, will scream about transgender. And, you know, and look, we've covered the conversation as well. Pretty damn in depth in all the criticisms. What's interesting, though, is that this person who is a transgender, which way does it go? Pretending to be a woman, that ultimately didn't mention it. Why? I don't know. Israeli, I guess. I mean, the same reason you would argue that if it's a Republican, they tend to pull back on the hard stuff, right? Who knows? I tend to think there's an issue not making, you know, Israel doesn't want to be called out, and this administration seems to be doing their bidding. But Gen X Girl says, don't worry, Israel, he'll be on a flight back to you shortly. And I'm willing to bet you anything that's the case. I checked before I went live. It's still up in the air. He's still being processed. But I'm willing to bet you that this person is going to be shuttled back to Israel as fast as possible. Just like this guy. And I said his name wrong the other day. It's actually Tom Alexandrovich. I think I said Abramovich. But we'll come back to this. High-ranking Israeli official who was caught in a pedophilia sting in the United States was flown back to Israel. Nothing discussed again after that. Very public story. Not a secret at all. But so this guy is interesting for other reasons. The violent crime story missing from the transgender prison lawsuit. So and this is the person, by the way. Now, there's I actually didn't include it. There was a person right here is working for Zoho who had the exact same name, and I'm pretty certain it's not the same guy, but you guys can decide for yourself, as well as the fact that ultimately I don't think he'd be working as a head guy at that company if this was all going down right now, but I guess that might not be updated. But I'll include that for, you know, austerity, but I don't believe that's the same person. So this is 2025. An Israeli secret agent. And it says computer genius, startup entrepreneur, blah, 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 who interrogated a Seacoast man at gunpoint. That's what got his, you know, this person's name, because basically, which to me starts to sound like an operation, an intelligence dynamic or something. So this person was a going through with their transition and, you know, as an Israeli agent, and ultimately got arrested because they were violently interrogating a person at gunpoint. I find that very relevant. And it says Alon, who was born in Israel, served with a distinction in the Israeli military, according to defense attorney Michael, Iacopino's sentencing memorandum. Alon, who's selected to serve in the Israeli Defense Force, Directorate of Military Intelligence, Unit 81, we just talked about that. Unit 81 is a secret technology unit within the Special Operations Division of the Directorate. Unit 81 was tasked building and supplying cutting-edge technologies to Israeli combat soldiers and spies. After leaving Unit 81, Allen worked in high-level computer engineering jobs at Amazon and Microsoft before founding 2 startup companies. Now, guess what? For the life of me, I can't find either of them. And this is mentioned by more than one article. So I guess it could be a mistake. I don't think it is, though. I think this is exactly what we've been covering. And this is the military intelligence overlap, the front company dynamic, and ultimately whether the transgender part is his own thing, who knows? But ICE just arrested him and is sending him back. Now, is that a cover for something else? Just thinking out loud. The point here, guys, is that 2 startups with this conversation of the startup nation fake company shell dynamic. And I can't find either of those 2 companies. And this guy is caught up with all these different overlaps as an agent. I just find that very relevant. And it says Levi then proposed kidnapping and interrogating the person we're discussing. MP is the name they give. So this person was clearly unhinged or just acting as an Israeli agent. Who knows? So I find that pretty interesting. Now, one thing I was going to say too is even though we're about to get into it now, I guess I shouldn't bring it up. I was going to say, I got to remember to mention at the beginning of the show if the title topic doesn't come up for a second, I want to make sure I make that clear for people, because I've been getting people frustrated going, I wanted to see the main thing and it didn't happen for an hour. You know, so a lot of topics. But again, senior Israeli official flees U.S. following arrest over pedophilia. That was August 17, 2025. Tom Alexandrovich. And guys, this is not a new topic. And you guys know this. You watch the show. We've talked about a lot of these. This is an example that goes back, I think, Biden-Trump overlap from the first administration. And this is a person from the State Department who resigned in protest because they refused to deal with, I'll let him explain it for himself.
We have to condemn the atrocities that happen every day to Palestinians in the West Bank. You mentioned sexual violence. I was part of the human rights vetting process for arms going to Israel. and a charity called Defense of Children International Palestine drew our attention at the State Department to the sexual assault, actually the rape, of a 13-year-old boy that occurred in an Israeli prison in the Mosque in Jerusalem. We examined these allegations. We believe they were credible. We put them to the government of Israel. And you know what happened the next day? The IDF went into the DCIP offices and removed all their computers and declared them a terrorist entity. I think it is vital that atrocities not happen to anyone, not sexual atrocities, not sexual violations, not any kind of gross violation of human rights. We are looking at a situation where there is so much dehumanification, where people...
Now, what's important here, guys, is that I mean, the U.S. government's been doing this around the world for a long time. You know, terrorist about anybody that they dislike or anybody they want to, for, you know, foreign elements they disagree with. But it's pretty clear that this is an Israeli tactic that's been, you know, or I mean, you could argue it went the other way, but I think it's historically clear that, I mean, this is what we get, right? That you have such blatant evidence, and it goes, well, they're a terrorist because they've created a opaque kind of situation where anything they want to shove into it gets completely covered by this terrorism doctrine. Well, it's just, you know, and there's no investigation. It allows them completely unilateral action. You know, it's like declaring an emergency, like Donald Trump just did for this recent executive order. Instead of just going through the normal motions, they declare an emergency to get special action, to hide certain things, to remove certain restrictions. This is what they always do. So on this point of it, this guy, it's also very relevant because the attention was about, obviously, this guy being caught in a pedophilia sting. Very real story. But there's more to it. The Israeli National Cyber Directorate, which is supervised by the Prime Minister's office, said in response to this, and this was about him facing felony charges for luring a child with Computer for Sex Act, or under that act. Now it says, the employee informed the directorate that during his trip to the United States, he was questioned by the U.S. authorities on matters not related to work matters and returned to Israel on the scheduled date of return. Remember, this is them being asked about this person trying to rape a child. And it says the directorate has not yet received additional details, though through the authorized channel, If it receives, the directorate will act accordingly. Quote, at this stage, in a joint decision, the employee went on leave to deal with the matter until things will become clear. Wow, real harsh. However, Ynet reported that contrary to the Israeli directorate statements, Las Vegas police very much did arrest this person. And they indicated themselves, the head of the Cyber Director's Technology Defense Division, literally, Alexandrovich, the head of the Cyber Directorate's Technological Defense Division, was arrested in the United States for a sting of pedophilia. And they respond by going, well, they questioned him and he was sent home. So they're all lying, guys. And literally, as we know, the story ended with the U.S. government allowing this guy to be sent back to Israel, where he continues to operate at the highest levels of power. The documents indicate that Alexandrovich is suspected of seducing a mentally ill child using computer technology to have sex. That's what the article highlights. Now, is that the full story? Was this about only pedophilia or at all even? I mean, I agree. I think that's the case. I think the reason he got caught was because he got caught up in a sting. But the interesting overlap is that the guy is literally head of the Cyber Directorate Technology. I mean, guys, that is what we just discussed the other day. That is the umbrella under which is Unit 81, Unit 8200. And on top of that he was in this country on that kind of operation, ultimately using a computer in this. I mean, it just seems interestingly overlapped to me. Either way, well, the 2 points. This guy's a predator and was allowed to leave because he's Israeli, and our government has no teeth when it comes to Israel or apparently anything in that conversation. On top of that, this guy is directly tied to this larger operation that we are seeing all over the world, specifically in the United States. And he's also a pedophile. You know, let that sink in. No, continuing, it says Israel's ambassador to the United Arab Emirates, Yoshi Shelley, was recalled last month after senior Emirati officials complained of inappropriate conduct. You know, in a totally separate story, really, totally not connected. This is a different story in the United Arab Emirates. Another Israeli ambassador, an Israeli ambassador, in the other guy was the head of the Cyber Directorate, considered close to Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu, this guy. A senior Israeli foreign ministry official told Channel 12 on Saturday, this was in 2025, August. He said on Saturday that, quote, the subject he talks about all the time in an exaggerated way is prostitutes. Adding, quote, That's what he tells everyone about. That's what he likes to talk about the most. It's just something we really have to start realizing, that there's something very dark and broken about the Israeli government. Just like I would argue about the U.S. government, guys, but it's understanding that there is a specific problem there. According to the report, Shelley, and look, I mean, one step back even, just so you understand, for those new, I feel like this is my opinion about government. I think the sociopaths and psychopaths the world around gravitate towards their positions of power in the government because it's the obvious position for them to be able to control everyone underneath them. I mean, read a book about sociopaths. So sociopathy and psychopathy are it's not hard to see the patterns and understand that these people know what they would do to others, so they gravitate towards the top of power. You know, it's the same reason a pedophile or a predator will end up at the position of a priest or a school teacher. There's a reason these things happen. Doesn't mean everybody, but understand that that's why I think this is the problem. It's not just Israel, but that does play a factor. We can see the very clear overrepresentation in these locations. According to the report, Shelley used to go to dubious places during his time in the UAE. When Emirati officials sought to coordinate these visits, Shelley went wild and just attacked the security guards by shouting, "You won't lock me up." Sure, quite the clearly innocent guy, right? Just think about all these weird, and this is what we're dealing with. Now, this is a guy who's running the cyber directorate. Certainly seems relevant to me. Now, before we get into the executive order, as Douglas McGregor pointed out in the first, we've heard, right? Hackers have now targeted water systems in 7 states, so we keep getting told. Optimist simply says, well, Whitney Webb has reported, I've played this clip for you more than once, a few years back, that U.S. infrastructural control that included water systems, dams, have been handed to companies that have direct ties to Israel. That's not a secret, by the way. Today, it's more obvious than ever, but 7 years ago, it was, or which they referenced, the years ago, it was something that was more behind the scenes. But now, because they're trying to reimagine all of the way that they present themselves, now NSO Group is totally legit, working with the Trump administration, even though it's not. And it's a very, very, very criminal organization, NSO Group, Pegasus, which has been caught for spying on journalists and civilians and governments. And they're literally contracted with ICE and the U.S. government. I mean, that's trying to change and reimagine and remaneuver the way that they appeared. And so now this kind of stuff is becoming on the surface when it should be saying, like, why are you giving the murderer responsibility over, or rather the rapist of responsibility over the women or the children or whatever? That's the kind of thing that you should be asking. Why are we allowing the top spyware manufacturer, a group that has been responsible for multiple hacks and backdoor, psyops or whatever you want to call it, inside the U.S. government, access to U.S. government infrastructure? It doesn't make any sense unless you realize one of two things. Long ago, the NDAA 219 point happened. And this is just another example of it going forward, or just a head fake. Or there's, more influence on it than we realize, and that they're battling for that every day. But the point is, on both those cases, that it's happening or happened. Not that we're fighting it from happening in the future, but that's always something we should be pointing to. But he highlights how in this interview, and this I believe is with Higher Side Chats, about how she's breaking. It's an audio interview, but the same conversation. It's a good interview. They discuss in long form the idea of all this stuff, as the dams and the infrastructure. And I'll play this clip for you right now, and I'll include the actual breakdown in this interview where she makes the larger conversation. Now, please forgive the weird music somebody added. The clip is just juxtaposed well. I didn't have time to break it down myself. Unfortunately, there's, like X-Files music playing behind it, but he makes the point anyway.
Co-founded this. So an Israeli intelligence guy forms this company and says, we're going to take care of American hospitals, dams, water infrastructure.
Dams come later, but it was first health infrastructure. And they partnered with CISA, that's supposed to protect critical structure, including election infrastructure, but also things like water systems, the power grid, all sorts of things like that, as well as hospitals. And beyond that, it's not just hospitals anymore. As you mentioned, it's expanded to dams, it's expanded to water systems, and also nuclear reactors in the United States. So you have a foreign intelligence-founded nonprofit being offered access to all of these critical systems in the United States.
How is this being allowed? I mean, we know the deep connections between Israel and the United States. So this goes deeper than that.
Just a kind of quick, really just to show you this is something that she's been talking about a long time. Her and I have had interviews about this more than once. I mean, how long have we been talking about the dams and the remember this became important for two reasons during COVID. It was surveillance, but it was also medical surveillance. The idea of tracking your wastewater and seeing whether you might be getting sick in the future. It's all just a cover for the same type of ongoing surveillance. It's ultimately the same conversation. Medical, pre-crime, it's all the, it ends up, let's put it this way, it goes to the same endpoint of total information awareness, which again is the earlier name for the company that ultimately became Palantir and everything else we're talking about today. Not in a sense of, what it represents. And in fact, in very real ways as well. So this is the main point today. Trump order aims to block foreign backdoors in U.S. power grid gear. August 27th. President Trump issued Executive Order 14420 on Wednesday, declaring a national emergency to mitigate vulnerabilities in the United States bulk power system arising from foreign supplied electrical equipment. The order attributes the heightened emergency status to rapid growth across data centers, AI, advanced manufacturing, defense production. Officials noted that dependence on grid reliability magnifies the impact of foreign supply chain disruptions or targeted attacks that exploit built-in backdoors for remote access. It's like we haven't, who's the number one problem in that regard? It's obvious. What's interesting, though, is think about this. If this is their genuine response, because who knows if this is just what they want you to think they're doing and thinking. Always ask that. But if this is really what they're doing, ask yourself how incredibly incompetent and lacking foresight it is for this government to go, oh, we're in the midst of doing all this, and now we need to retroactively protect ourselves. Maybe you should have built this out before you drove in the direction of doing the thing that now retroactively needs protection. It's like these people just seem to be rushing forward to whatever they're pointed at. There's obviously elements of this that are more, I guess, insightful, if you will, or just more in the know. But at the end of the day, it's hard not to see the level of incompetence that it just exudes, left and right, guys. Because it's just wild to me. That's why I question whether this might not be really what they're doing. I'd like to believe they're not that stupid, but maybe. Ultimately saying we need to get around this now that we're, half a foot into it, But it says targeted technologies include transformers, inverters, energy storage systems, industrial control systems, such as remote terminal units, programmable logic controllers, and safety systems. The order also covers associated firmware, software, remote access capabilities. Under the new directives, any acquisition, import, transfer, or installation of foreign-produced bulk power equipment, but you'll see it's specific to certain entities, not just foreign in general, after August 26, 2026, is prohibited if the transaction involves designated entities. So why would that be the case? Really ask yourself that. Why wouldn't you just say, well, foreign equipment needs to be better secured. We need to ultimately make sure whether UK, Russia, Sweden, doesn't matter. Obviously, you know why, because that means one of two things. Either there's some kind of a political dynamic where they don't want to, I guess, tarnish their relationship, but I don't believe that for a second. Or obviously there is a backdoor issue or some kind of other technical issue that this will hurt when it comes to Israel tech in the United States. I don't know how we don't see that. And it says the order does not name any country, but again, specifically lists only designated entities being the ones they focus on, while the focus is often on state-sponsored Chinese actors, which, of course, clearly China, like Russia, or just like the U.S. in reverse does to literally everybody, they're trying to sabotage. They're trying to infiltrate. Largely state-sponsored Chinese actors targeting U.S. power grid networks through active intrusions. These directives signal a shift towards mitigating upstream supply chain risks and embedded hardware backdoors. Yeah, good. The idea that you would try to get ahead of backdoors while the tech is everywhere through your country just seems kind of, again, lacking foresight. So here's the two things, by the way, on the executive order. Note that they do this a lot lately. And I think they've always done this, but I haven't always seen these right next to each other. Both on August 26th. Both about the executive order. One is just a fact sheet. Now, what I noticed is the fact sheet happens to leave out some of the most important information that I feel is important. So take note of that. This is just the fact sheet. Here's the actual executive order. It is different. So when they're just truncating, giving you, here are the bullet points, maybe you don't trust what they find relevant. Just want to point that out. Here's the actual executive order. Executive order 14420. Certain foreign actors are increasingly creating and exploiting vulnerabilities in the United States bulk power system. Yeah, clearly. but that's not the one they're pointing at. I mean, just to jump ahead, only, and by the way, to make it clear, only to make this point, because you know that I already think this is the case, and I'd like to believe that you already know because we've proven it to you on this show, or just because it's self-evident to anybody who's been paying attention in spyware for a long time. Simply ask Grok, who is the most likely culprit in this very situation? Israel. What country is number one in the world in the field of spyware, i.e. installing tech backdoors? Israel. So really ask yourself how stupid it is that you can make an entire order about the one thing of backdoor spyware and not include Israel. As you'll see, it becomes even more clear. The rapid growth of advanced manufacturing, data centers, artificial intelligence, and defense protection, all the things that Americans are clamoring for? No. What they want creates the necessity for the things that we don't need. And defense production has increased the nation's dependence on abundant, reliable electricity and magnified the consequences of a successful attack or supply disruption on the bulk power system. Again, these terms they're using are, pretty broad, attacks and disruption on bulk. That's what they're bragging about when it comes to foreign operations. Now, you could still argue that they just don't do it to the United States, but history would belie that point. Such equipment might have digital backdoors built into their systems that allow a foreign country to access that equipment remotely. I mean, it's just like, as I'm reading this, I'm laughing out loud going, clearly there's one group that is just known for this. Any acquisition, importation, transfer, or installation of any foreign produced bulk power system electric equipment. So the whole thing reads as if it's just like anything foreign, but they make it clear, as I said, that that's not the case. Subject to the jurisdiction or direction of a covered foreign entity. Poses an undue risk of sabotage, subversion, unauthorized access, malicious remote action, or supply disruption. Well, let's just, since it seems to resonate right there with that point, sure you know, talking about supply disruption, well, who talks about disrupting supply chains like it's part of their plan?
Where did they buy it from, or think they were buying it from?
We have an incredible array of possibilities of creating foreign companies that have no way being traced back to Israel, shell companies over shell companies who affect the supply chain to our favor. We create a pretend world. We are a global production company. We write the screenplay. We're the directors. We're the producers. We're the main actors. The world is our stage.
Did you see any surprises in Gaza?
Surprises?
Yeah.
Like you mean intelligence surprises?
Pages, walkie-talkies. Do you know how many treated equipment do we have in these countries? You don't. I do.
You mean booby-trapped equipment?
Not only booby-trapped.
And spying.
Manipulated equipment. All right?
In which countries are you talking about?
All the countries that you can imagine.
Former head of Mossad. So, when controlling supply chains for their favor, well, maybe we should consider Israel in the very point of supply chain disruption, or any number of these points that they're very well known for. Rules and regulations issued pursuant to this order may, among other things, determine that particular countries or persons are a covered foreign entity exclusively for the purposes of this order. Please read through this all for yourself. There's other points that are relevant to understand how this will be maneuvered, but for the point of today, that seems to be a relevant idea. Because it gets into, as usual, these things will take on more understandable form as they start to become something that's used, because who knows what some of these terms will ultimately amount to in the way it's going forward. But I mean, it's obvious what they're highlighting, right? Infrastructure, material, large infrastructure equipment is needed for the control grid, AI, data center dynamic. The term covered foreign entity means a country or any person owned by, controlled by, or subject to the jurisdiction or direction of a government of a foreign country that is subject to a United States arms embargo or sanctions regime. Well, that's very specific. Under the International Traffic in Arms Regulation, or that the Secretary, in consultation with the Secretary of War, which, by the way, hold on, and Director of National Intelligence and the Assistant to the President for National Security Affairs, has determined is engaged in conduct that is detrimental to the national security or foreign policy of the United States. So people who are sanctioned, embargoed, or that they otherwise decide as the Secretary of State War, of Defense or War, is added to that list because of the last listing of points that are, engaged in conduct that's detrimental. I don't know, like, putting Stingray devices on the White House, maybe. Nah, not that. That's okay. They're friends. But so the idea being simply that this is something that they can carve out while pretending it's about foreign problems. Now, what I was going to say really quickly is, as somebody's been pointing out, that's a good right point to make, actually, as they love to make this about, they change it to Secretary of War, Department of War, but then when they list off the information, they say the Defense Department budget, or, even them. I just find that interesting. Well, no, that would be rightly the war budget, wouldn't it? It's funny. It's funny how they want to sound tough about war, but then when they want to say it's a war budget, they don't want to make it. That sounds bad, right? It's just funny. Cowards. Okay, so this seems pretty damn clear to me. You're creating a situation where you can absolutely carve out who is the obvious, indisputed champion in the direction of spyware, infiltration, backdoors, remote manipulation. Funny. This is just the statista. It's countries initiating the largest share of cyber incidents with political dimension worldwide from January 1st to August 22. Look at this. Russia, 10. China, 9.5. But you have this weird anomaly down here, 32% not attributed, or 24% unknown. Israel's not even on the list. And this is just pathetically laughable. Like, again, this is not just my opinion. Israel's known for it. They're literally in a positive way in the field praised as the number one in the field. And yet we act like we don't know what's going on there. I mean, it's just very blatant to me. Now, again, juxtaposing this with the point of creating in another executive order, another loophole or opaque situation where companies can start in this country who are run by Israel, China, or Russia, where they don't have to admit that. With all the stuff they're pretending to do, ask yourself why that makes sense, other than opening the door for that to be allowed so they don't have to deal with the literal overtaking of this country, if you look at it that way. And I'm not talking about the political side of it. I mean, this is like, however you want to frame it. Setting up fake companies that are operating Israeli intelligence under the guise of a U.S. company, manipulating U.S. policy, infiltrating cabinets, using the U.S. military to conduct foreign policy. How else do you frame this? Look at, 219 is just outlining stuff that's already happening, guys. Now, I'll also include this that relates to what we discussed there, but this is a great article talking about, as I just discussed earlier briefly, how Israel's 8200, that's under the Cyber Directorate, the Unit 8200, it's the most notorious for this cyber manipulation, but how 8200 became the backbone of global cyber defense, and a critical threat. Because the point is that this is how they were framing it. Like, they're going to save the world from cyber threats. All of a sudden, though, became this weird consistency of the very people that work with them became the ones that got hacked. Sort of like Flock going, we stop all the crime, but then being put up and then crime gets worse. Maybe it's because it wasn't about stopping crime, right? Now, even on that note, by the way, I don't think I'm probably included it somewhere. Don't forget that the Flock guy, the systems and engineers for algorithm, was in the Israeli military for 7 years. I think I probably have it right here. Let's see. There it is. I probably have it up elsewhere, but since I mentioned it, and that doesn't prove that he's anything other than somebody who worked for the Israeli military for 7 years for military intelligence, excuse me. But he's the algorithm and systems engineer full-time for Flock today. With all that we're talking about, I do very much find that relevant. Oh, we also talked about briefly recently Trump creating state-backed private cyber attack forces, which is the same conversation in a different realm. Talking about using these companies that are in many cases just a one-step removed extension of the Israeli government and intelligence under one of the shell companies we're talking about, and using them to privatize the cyber attack force, which has historically been intelligence they barely even admit to. And that became very relevant as we go through this because it relates to all these same companies. The ones that at the heads are either like adamantly fighting for Israel's genocide, like Ellison's and Oracle, Palantir, or literally interconnected with the intelligence. Trump deputizes private companies for offensive cyber strikes against foreign criminals. We also talked about Palantir partnering with major news organizations to use your data as what they called actionable intelligence. So considering what all the things we're discussing, and these groups might very well be acting on behalf of somebody other than U.S. interest or other than the U.S. government, I wonder what this is like absorbing all of this data. But this overlaps with the larger point here. Army embeds active duty PSYOP soldiers at local TV stations. Like, this is not just about propagandizing you, but propagandizing you for whatever this transition is about to be. This muckrock, This is from 2017. Now, what we're going to go through really quickly is just a couple of obvious examples of historical examples of Israel being caught for being involved in a massive scandal. And ask yourself why this, why wouldn't, I mean, obviously, you don't think they know about these things? They're choosing to hide the obvious culprit here. So that's kind of what I think this legislation or executive order is about. By doing it, they're acting like they're fighting it. But what they're really doing it is hiding the biggest problem. So people that don't know any better go, look, they're fighting the things you're pointing to. No, they're really not. It's sort of like saying we're stopping COVID shots, but when you read the document, they're actually making it worse. That's what this keeps doing. Or we're stopping glyphosate. No, you're not. You're making it a national security priority. But people only read headlines sometimes, guys. Justice Department records confirm promise scandal. One of the most obvious examples where the Israeli government literally took this promise software and created a Trojan horse with it. Justice Department documents recently released by the National Archives confirm what some InSlaw affair is what it's called too, witnesses have been saying for decades, that a copy of promise software was given to Israel. Now, the argument becomes that it's something that was also taken advantage of from Israel's side in regard to the Trojan horse, which arguably was used elsewhere. That you could argue the U.S. was involved with, but my point is, of course, this was something that Israel was involved with and also took advantage of the United States. Previous records and admissions acknowledged the fact that the software was given to Israel while insisting that it wasn't delivered to the Israeli spy master, Rafi Eitan. Now, they lied about that very publicly, and it's now proven that they did, the U.S. government. The man they claim they gave the software to wasn't even in the country at the time. And so a story it's worth getting into. There's bigger documents down here, but there's plenty of examples. Like I said, it's not accused. It was a bigger story. Israel was putting spy devices in 2019 while Trump was in office. Stingray devices on the White House. We have examples of the NSO spyware being literally found on U.S. State Department official phones. This one, 2021. See, both left and right, guys. It's because it's all the same thing. The hacks, which took place in the last several months, hit U.S. officials either based in Uganda or focused on matters concerning East African country. So they're what? They're hacking U.S. official phones using their spyware? But sure, let's not worry about them using exactly what we're highlighting here. NSO Group, Pegasus, graphene. I mean, all these different things are designed, as we just talked about, as we're going to get into next, manipulating content, both hacking, planting, manipulating, removing, but also altering video. Creating fake information, deep fakes to frame people. Like, this is what they do. And even Haaretz was telling you that's what they're responsible for, like literally against U.S. officials, guys. Here's another example. This is one we've talked about more than once. They just haven't shown you this article. Here's what we covered it on. But this actually came out 2 days before my show, which is, I'm glad there's other people that are actually seeing the real story here, which it wasn't, as I've told you many times, it wasn't Signalgate. Signalgate meets WordPress. Outgoing National Security Advisor's phone, Mike Walls, bumps messages via Israeli app. It's called Telemessage. It is an app designed by Israeli National Security, or Israeli intelligence, and it is for archiving signal and relaying it back to Israel. And he was literally using it inside the inner circle of the White House. And he got caught. And by the way, anybody who knows, you can zoom in and see that that's not signal he's using. They called it Signalgate because it was probably the effort to cover up the very point that it was actually telemessage. But whatever, either way, nothing happened. Wired, 2012. Shady companies with ties to Israel wiretap the U.S. for the NSA. So is that the NSA for the NSA, or is that Israel using the NSA to spy on Americans? I think you're starting to get the picture here, guys, and this gets much worse. And the bigger, I mean, we've gone over things like this many times, but this just showed you the global example of this, and that the articles right here from The Guardian. The hacking and disinformation team meddling in elections. Jorge is his name. He's an Israeli agent. That's what this is a larger operation. My title was simply called The Israeli Election Interference and Psychological Operation Industrial Complex, 2024. But the point of this is something that is global. It's not just unique to the United States, but it's clearly being done through the U.S. government at this point, but through the U.S. entities to all of us. And this was about manipulating elections. and other ththings as well. Fake social media campaigns. I mean, right now it's public. Yet Israel literally paying think tanks to lie about things, alter AI information. It's just not, I mean, how does anybody not see this? It's being publicly covered. This is from 2025. ICE obtains access to Israeli-made spyware that can hack phones and encrypted apps. Again, going back to the story from a long time ago with the FBI and with Orlando and the phone, that's what this was. That's why they covered it up. They hid that from us all the way back then because it was Israeli spyware that allowed them to get past what at that time was at least ostensibly unhackable. All in front of us. Include these for you. Now, lastly, on this segment, before we get into the TOCA overlap to finish up, technically it is about TOCA, but this is just the segue here that Truth Out covered this in 2022. Israeli firm plans expanding its deployment of video altering tech. Now, why is that even a useful thing for anybody other than criminals and manipulators? TOCA sells hacking technology capable of finding, accessing, and manipulating security and smart camera footage. That's 2022. So let's talk about this from Whitney's article from 2021. Now, the main point here is that this is not, this is old story. I mean, she talked about this in 2021, as we're going to go over right now, as the idea that, we're all talking about NSO Group, but here's one that's not getting as much attention. Not that the NSO Group and Pegasus as the product they're clearly relevant, but that this is something far more, it's almost designed to be missed. And on top of it, this one, TOCA, is publicly, like on the surface, directly connected to the Israeli government and the Israeli military, whereas the NSO Group has never been like publicly acknowledged as working for Israel, even though it's very clear that it is. Meet TOCA, the most dangerous Israeli spyware firm you've never heard of. Now, today, it's been getting more attention. People have been doing, like Josh Walkos, we mentioned as well, did a thread breaking down this information. Remember, this is something that is very well done in this article, and you should take the time to absorb as much as you can. So again, as usual, this is her article from Midland Hangout. I'm using this just because for some reason when I highlight on their article, it makes the text get small. I'm not sure why, but just that this is the article and I'm using the reader that makes it easier to see. So 2021. The simple point here, guys, is veterans of Israeli intelligence unit 8200 are selling, I guess, the technology, or rather more so, I think it's the tech, but also just them as an entity. Like, that's how this has always been sold. And, that they get such high pay and all this stuff. It's like they are part of the product, right? That they're so good at what they do. But see, it's not just a tech guy. It's tech knowledge, but it's tied directly to an Israeli intelligence agenda. So they're selling this stuff to democratic and authoritarian governments alike, which is not new. But of course, they argue it's sort of like, we're only giving it to the groups that we work with. But when you break it down, as we're going to highlight in this article, as she highlights, and I'll make some additional points, they say that, but then ultimately will go on to give it to people like Chile, Nigeria, who are very publicly supporting Palestine. So we're going to make a point about what happened since this article forward. But it says used to illegally spy on an estimated 50,000 individuals, journalists, human rights activists, business executives, academics, prominent political leaders. Not new. And this goes for not just TOCA, but NSO Group, the same dynamic. It says leaders of France, Pakistan, South Africa, Egypt, Morocco, Iraq. I mean, they were talking about leaders of these countries. That's why the Jorge point is important, because it's been going on a long time. Now, think of all the blackmail that they've absorbed by listening and spying and taking anything they can use to coerce power. While the NSO Group has become infamous, other Israeli companies with even deeper ties to Israeli intelligence apparatus have been selling software that not only provides the exact same services to governments and intelligence agencies, but purports to go even further. Now, under the title Worse Than Pegasus, TOCA was launched in 2018 with the explicit purpose of selling a tailored ecosystem of cyber capabilities and software products for governmental, law enforcement, and security agencies. Now, see, this was the effort. Now, only just now I see it sort of coming to fruition in that way, whether TOCA or anything else. But I think this is them trying to kind of reorganize the front-facing perception of what they were doing, as opposed to the quiet behind the scenes intelligence sabotage. Same thing they're doing here. They're just selling it as sort of like the good guy version, fighting for the good guys and democratic, but clearly not, because they're also selling it to other people that aren't doing that. But the way they utilize it is malicious from the get-go. TOCA advertised itself as a one-stop hacking shop for governments, provide spy tools for whatever device its clients require, including not only smartphones, but a special focus on the so-called Internet of Things. Now, that is very relevant because look at where we're going, guys. And that's what it gets into. Devices like your Amazon Echo, your whatever, if you, God forbid, you actually have a listening device like that in your home, worse than anything else, by the way. Those things are designed to be picking up ambient conversation, recording. And it's been proven 1,000 times over. And on top of that, your Ring cameras, the cops are now pretending that they have like justifiable access to those things at all time because ongoing investigations. I'll play a clip right now. Google Nest, connected home products, fridges, thermostats, alarms, smart toasters. Like, that's insane, guys. That's what this stuff is designed to infiltrate and manipulate. And we're talking about the kind of tech you don't even need to allow, guys. I mean, that's actually a good place just to play this because what we're talking about is how this overlaps with the kind of stuff we're seeing in our country or elsewhere in the world, but how the enforcement arm are utilizing this stuff. Now, this is kind of tangential to the point today, but we all know this is relevant in how the authorities, the powers that shouldn't be, are using this stuff in ways that violate rights every single day. I hope I still have it. Let me see. Maybe I got rid of it. Oh, you know what? I think I did. Well, in any case, it was the clip that we played simply showing them going, the cops going up to the door, the Ring camera door, or a door with a Ring camera, and then demanding entry, or first of all, demanding the Ring camera because they say a crime happened on the street. Yeah, I don't have it. It's okay, but you guys saw it on a previous show. I'll try to find it, include it in the notes. But then she's saying, no, it's not recording, and clearly it was. But regardless, doesn't matter. It's my home. It's my recording. Get off my front lawn. But they go, if you either show me that it's not recording or we'll come rip that off the wall and come back. Swear to God. Then she says, no, the cop pushes her way inside the door. It's like 3 a.m. And in their home, force her to give him her phone, use her face to unlock her cell phone to access this information because of ongoing investigation. I mean, it's no different than a cop saying that you have to get out of the car because they want to ask you a question, even though you haven't broken the law. And if you don't, you're in obstructing their investigation. Your rights are being shown to you that they don't care about them. Your rights are inalienable. They exist whether or not they respect them, guys. They didn't give you those rights. Your rights are inherent. They're choosing to ignore them, but just recognize that. That's insane where we are. But the point is that this kind of infiltration of this tech is being used right now. But on top of it, it's also, watching you while, in your home, while you're in your private moments or whatever else, absorbing information that could be used against you. It says, TOCA offers its customers in law enforcement, government, and intelligence the ability to obtain targeted intelligence and to conduct forensic investigations as well as covert operations. I mean, ICE has access to this. And we've seen the frivolous, incompetent nature of these organizations. I mean, right now, more than ever. People that have been getting 4 weeks of training are out there stealing people's cars. So, literally beating people up and accusing them of violence, or shooting people in the streets and accusing them of crimes, claiming people had guns when they did not, saying they beat them up with a shovel when it didn't actually happen. All of this being proven in court, guys. And then getting let go. And of course, they still get their money because they arrested somebody and there's a docket back there we've already talked about. Just numbers. They've made it very clear. Whether or not they're actually charged, they get some return for bringing people in. It's crazy, man. Targeted intelligence, forensic investigations, because what we've talked about as well with the other, I think like graphite and the others they use in conjunction with this, well, now you have a situation where you get to look, well, there's somebody in the car right there. Well, here's somebody next, let's say that's the person you're looking at, the driver, but there's somebody else in the passenger seat. It has nothing to do with what's happening. Well, now you have access to their information. And then from that person, access to the people they talk to and connections with them and the social media and the cars they drive. That's real, guys. That's the same thing Flock is doing, whether or not they're being honest about that. And it is an interconnected network of data capable of targeting any device connected to the internet, including, but not limited to, smartphones. That's the bigger point about all this. It's just about anything all the time, no click, access. The sales pitch for the NSO Group's Pegasus is remarkably similar to TOCA, and that sales pitch has not stopped its software from being used to target dissidents, politicians, journalists, simply meaning it's obvious that this is not going to stop them either by simply saying it's for the good guys. To use these tools for the purpose of obtaining blackmail is obviously what I think is majorly relevant here with the bigger conversation. With the Epstein files ongoing, with the lies we've been, simply put, what Israel is known for with the act, and also known for the number one spyware, hacking, just intelligence side of it. You put those two things together, I mean, you're literally giving the number one blackmailing, number one, spyware entity access to all this information, and we're going to just hope they don't. That's like I said before. You don't let a pedophile run a kindergarten, guys. It doesn't make any sense that you would open this door and act like that's not at least concerning. TOCA has been directly partnered with the Israeli Ministry of Defense and other Israeli intelligence and security agencies since its founding. So it's not just a tangential thing. It's tied directly to the Defense Department, directly to intelligence. Further evidence that TOCA is part of this Israeli government effort to seed foreign governments with technology products deeply tied to Israeli military and intelligence services is the fact that one of the main investors in TOCA is Dell Technology Company, or Technology Capital, which is an extension of the well-known tech company Dell. Dell was founded by Michael Dell, a well-known pro-Israel partisan who has donated millions of dollars to the Friends of the IDF and is one of the top supporters of the so-called anti-BDS bills that prevent publicly employed individuals or public institutions in several U.S. states from supporting nonviolent boycotts of Israel, even on humanitarian grounds. At Mint Press News, which is what this was originally written for and republished on Unlimited Hangout, as Mint Press previously noted, the fact that a major producer of consumer electric goods is heavily investing in a company that markets the hacking of that very technology should obviously be a red flag. Crazy. The government's initially admitted use of the high-tech sector to counter the BDS movement coincided with the launch of a new Israeli military and intelligence agency policy in 2012, whereby, and you've heard this many times from the Prince and the Spy article and plenty of others that comes from an article in 2012, whereby, quote, this is from the Israeli government, cyber-related and intelligence projects that were previously carried out in-house in the Israeli military and in Israel's main intelligence arms are transferred to companies that, in some cases, were built for the exact purpose. Now, so the 2 points are that they're literally creating, they're transferring intelligence operations to companies. That's what they're saying. A company that's running for day-to-day operations, but they go, here, we're going to give you an intelligence operation. But it says in some of those cases, these companies were built for the operation. So you see the difference there, but that's all the same point. They're fronts, whether built for it or not. One of the reasons this was reportedly launched was to retain members of Unit 8200 engaged in military work who were moving to jobs in the country's highest-paying tech sector. Through the new policy that this new policy that was worked to essentially merge much of the private tech sector with Israel's national security state, some Unit 8200 and other intelligence veterans continue their work for the state, but benefit from a private sector salary. The end result is that an unknown and a likely very high number of Israeli tech companies are led by veterans of the Israeli military and Israeli intelligence agencies and serve, for all intents and purposes, as a front company. A closer examination of TOCA strongly suggests that this is one such front company. But either way, even if that is the case or not, it's obvious that they can utilize it that way if and when they want to. And this is what they brag about. It's not a secret. So it's funny when you point to it, they call you racist or, whatever. It's something that they literally brag about. That's not just in cover on a 60 Minutes interview. Like that, the link that she does link to in this in 2012. That's an interview with the Israeli military, openly saying this. I mean, that's where the whole startup nation conversation came from. Now it says, under TOCA, born out of Israel's national security state, the company was co-founded by Ehud Barak, former prime minister, Alan Cantor, Kfir Waldman, and retired IDF Brigadier General Yaron Rosen. Rosen, the firm's founding CEO and now co-CEO, is the former chief of the IDF's cyber staff, where he was the lead architect of all IDF cyber activities, including those executed by Israeli Military Intelligence Unit 8200. Barak has previously chaired and invested in Carbine 911, a group which has sort of merged with Axon, by the way, and of course is the same just to the hilt with Israeli intelligence. Carbine being a conversation we've talked about a lot, it ties back to the same kind of, we're going to come back to this in a quick second to carry this over, but Little Leshem, the Israeli spy here, is connected to it as well. Same with Eric Prince, but the point is in that through her in the same connection. But this was a company that was put out for 911 call centers and still exists to this day, despite the fact that Epstein himself invested in this company. And yet It's prominent today and is out there recording your information. Only saved for a limited time. I'm sure you believe that, don't you? Considerable evidence has pointed to Epstein having been an intelligence asset of the Israeli military intelligence who accrued blackmail on powerful individuals for the benefit of Israel's national security state and other intelligence agencies, as well as for personal gain. Now, Pierre Peleg, the company's vice president for strategic projects, TOCA, is the former head of the research and development division at the Israel's National Cyber Directorate. While at Israel's National Cyber Directorate, Peleg worked closely with Tal Goldstein, who at the time, and I believe he still is actually, the head of strategy for the World Economic Forum's Partnership Against Cybercrime, whose members include government agencies of the US, Israel, and the UK. Right, some of the leading culprits for the very thing they pretend they're fighting. Funny, that is, capable of controlling the flow of information, data, and money on the internet. Urgently creating the cyber equivalent of the World Health Organization to combat the so-called cyber pandemic. Like, this is their statement. Like, so they're working with the very people from the WEF. They're talking about creating basically a WHO equivalent for cyber threats. And this is a group that's like the leading threat, and they're worked right into this. This is how this works. Now, of course, you might have not heard, the important part to show you this, where I think this gets the most relevant for Americans today, is first, the fact that this was back in 2024 by Andreessen Horowitz, Mark Andreessen, and the people connected with this company. U.S. government agencies legally hack into cell phones or emails all the time, says the article. Interesting. The interest in hacking, they're rising interest in hacking, in Wi-Fi connected security cameras and other IT, IoT products, Internet of Things, which is the focus right now. TOCA, an Israeli startup, which is backed by Andreessen Horowitz. They got, what was it again? Oops. I don't think I highlighted it. Bottom line, though, the point is that it's just being invested in by this company is not guaranteed to make you a criminal. Same with like just being Israeli, right? But the point is that it's in this same inner circle is connected to all these different points around Trump, around the technocratic conversation, around all this, the transition. It's very clear. And just so happens to be directly funded by I don't know how you missed that. And this is a Israeli intelligence company tied directly to them. And you've got Mark Andreessen and his company funding them. I find that weirdly relevant. And then let me make sure there was one other point down here. Yeah, it says Israel, where TOCA is headquartered, has gained some renown for this kind of intelligence gathering. TOCA has sought to avoid scrutiny on Israeli spyware outfits like the U.S.-sanctioned NSO group, publicly promising that it only does business with governments from a select list of countries with a good track record on civil liberties and corruption. Well, we'll get to the Nigeria point, right? You show the contradiction for multiple reasons, but also in 2026, after what we just read about what TOCA actually is, TOCA deepens engagement with the United States and allied government partners, but they name an American the CEO and now pretend it's an American company. This is the point I've been making relentlessly. Officially transitioning to a U.S.-based company with headquarters in Maryland. Now, just because right now we can clearly go, well, wait a minute, it's an Israeli company run by Israelis, directly run with Israeli intelligence at both involved and running it from behind the scenes, and is literally in Israel. So it's an Israeli company that's now coming to the United States. Okay, now what happens in a year? What happens in, a week when this gets scrubbed from the internet? The point is that now it becomes a U.S. company. And they talk about it like a U.S. company. That's exactly why this conversation comes up again. That's what Comframe was. That's what a lot of these things are. Fake front companies for intelligence. And Comframe, literally designed to get Israeli tech in front of the U.S. military, as they were openly stating at the time, doesn't even exist right now, as far as I can tell. It's time and time and time again. TOCA is pioneering a new era of innovation that unlocks the full potential of intelligence. And it says TOCA's decision to establish its headquarters in the United States reflects the country's central role in advancing global security, innovation, and trusted government collaboration. Why wouldn't you do it in Israel? By operating from Maryland with an ongoing subsidiary, Fort Detrick is in Maryland, and with an ongoing subsidiary in Israel, effective in late 2025, TOCA is positioning itself closer to its most strategic partners while aligning with the policy, regulatory, and operational environments that define modern intelligence. TOCA employs approximately 100 professionals with deep expertise across government, military, and private sector. You damn well know that's Unit 8200. It's exactly what it is. Stemmed directly from Israeli intelligence, not tangentially. It's connected publicly to. Anyway, it just blows me away how silly this is, right? That now they can just pretend like, no, the subsidiary is in Israel and we're based in Maryland. No, it was founded in Israel, built in Israel, grown in Israel, employed by Israeli intelligence, and now you just shove it this way, put a U.S. CEO in front of it and call it an American company? And this is why I bring this argument up about Trump. Trump makes it easier for foreign companies to secretly operate as U.S. companies. That's what this is about, whether China or Russia or anybody else. But Israel happens to be the focal point today. Find that to be insane. Continuing, Andreessen Horowitz is another of Toka's main investors, currently advised by former Secretary of Treasury Larry Summers. What do you know? A close friend of the infamous pedophile Jeffrey Epstein. Now, what's interesting is when she wrote this in 2021, we didn't have the open and Horowitz, or Andreessen Horowitz in particular, Mark Andreessen in particular, but, all of them are packed in the Trump's administration. We were talking about them long before it was as obvious that they were leading the direction here. In light of the aforementioned policy of Israel's government to use private tech companies as fronts, the combination of Toka's direct Israeli government ties, the nature of its products and services, and the numerous significant connections of its leaders and investors to both Israeli military intelligence and past Israeli espionage scandals strongly suggest that Toka is one such front. Israeli intelligence has engaged in this exact type of behavior before in the Promise software scandal, whereby Israeli super spy Robert Maxwell sold bugged software to the U.S. government, including highly sensitive locations involved in classified nuclear weapons research. Israeli intelligence gained access to those same systems and devices long time ago. Israel's government was not held accountable by the U.S. government or the international community for, you fill in the blank continually, targeting Palestinian allies, which is largely what this came around. Now, just quickly, there's a lot of good information in here, but it says the World Bank selected Toka in February of last year to enhance Nigeria's cyber development. So what she highlights in this, I think I did highlight it. Let me see. Yeah, let me read. I'll read both these and I'll read it and then I'll show you. There's both Nigeria and Chile and plenty of others, by the way. The World Bank and the Inter-American Development Bank selected Toka to advise the government of Chile on next steps for the country's national cybersecurity. So both examples are about increasing their cybersecurity, right? As a Israeli intelligence company. So it says, while Toka frames both of these projects, Chile and Nigeria, as aimed at helping the cyber readiness and economies of these countries it now services, Israeli media has painted a different picture. I found this really interesting. To just quickly point, the article is right here. You can read the link. But it's simply saying that, one source quoted as saying the development banks are a way to help advance Israel's interests. This is not philanthropy. So it's like they don't even want to be seen. So they're using the front idea of doing this to help people. But then when they're acknowledged for helping people, they're like, no, it's about us. I just find it very weird. Seems like you're undermining your own front idea or, interesting. But it says, highly likely that the reason both Nigeria and Chile were chosen as the first of Toka's development bank contracts was aimed at advancing the Israeli government agenda in those specific countries, like the normalization agenda. Now, what's important to highlight, though, I thought there was one other point. I might be redundant in a second, but that what she highlights in this article, I think I'll just read this last part, then I'll show you next. It's about Nigeria and Chile, but she says the media has largely absolved the Israeli government of any role in that affair, the NSO group Pegasus, despite the fact that the NSO group's sales of Pegasus to foreign governments has been approved and defended by the Israeli government. I mean, you can't miss that. That's like playing dumb when we all see what's happening, kind of like everything else we're seeing right now. But so what she highlights in this article, very well done, is that Nigeria and Chile were entering into these contracts in 2021, and that the article is written in 2021. And she says, well, seeing as how we know what this group is doing, it doesn't bode well for the future for these countries. So I figured, let's find out what happened, right? So you quickly jump into this, you'll find, well, Nigeria looks like in August of 2026 is the second most targeted country in Africa for cyber attacks. So you can either decide that Toka just literally doesn't work, but yet is still being sold as the number one whatever, or It's responsible for allowing this, doing it, however you want to look at it. Now, that's just opinion. You can decide for yourself. Most business owners are still not taking it seriously. Is the second most targeted country in Africa for cyber attacks. And this very clearly does kick off 2021, 2022, 2023. And of course, the same thing, Nigeria's cybersecurity reckoning, the breach wave, and the council racing to catch up. June, and this was, I think, 2022. I forget the dates in there somewhere. So where's Toka? Why aren't they helping? Is that the whole point? Here's a kind of a list, the state of data protection in Nigeria. And it goes through a whole bunch of these. Now, I'm not saying they're all interconnected. It's just interesting to me that you have all these examples, 2024, June, of hacks, breaches. Again, either it's not working or it's the responsible party. Okay, Chile, 2025. Chile suffered 27.6 billion attempted cyber attacks in 2024. Now, of course, you might go, well, that meant they didn't happen, but a lot of them did. But realizing how much the focus, why? Why all of a sudden? It just seems interconnected to me. Now, you can continue to find, there's a ton of these examples of, I think there's the translation issue. 8 months after the cyber attack, parent company, the consequences of the impact. This was, where's the date? So I'm just trying to skim through these real quick. 2023. Here is 2025. Entel delete report, or digital report, warns of rise in ransomware, data leaks, cyber espionage in Chile. And then a larger report in general, also to be translated, but it's exactly what this is talking about. Some rapid increase in spyware and ransomware in Chile. Okay, well, then the point is, Whitney called it exactly right. Doesn't bode well for using the Israeli spyware thing that hacks people as your protection, because they're probably just going to hack you and spyware you, or whatever you want to call it. Well, of course, in Whitney's article, she highlights this from 2021. Revealed, leak uncovers global abuse of cyber surveillance weapon. Now, that gets into the idea of the NSO group and so on. Human rights activists, journalists, and lawyers across the world have been targeted by authoritarian governments using hacking software. The investigation by The Guardian and 16 other media organizations suggests widespread and continued abuse of that very spyware. By the way, it's funny. This was 2021. It was written. Tell me that's not Kash Patel's eye right there. Who knows? It very much looks like his eye for some reason. I thought that was weird. Probably just a coincidence. But another article, this is the one I was pointing to earlier, that goes 2023. So using this same point to go forward, you can see from 2021, when that was being called out, it only got more invasive and larger, global. And it was the hacking and disinformation team meddling in elections and doing social media campaigns, just like they're doing today, but far more on the surface. You just can't miss how clear all this is, guys. It's not hard to see. Now, the reason I brought up this point was simply to give you another parallel reference. Comframe, Eric Prince, it's just like the CEO, what's his name? Greg Smith. Whether he knows it or not, you're the token American to make this an American company. Because in this article, that's literally what they discuss. That the law requires that you can't sell directly to the U.S. military as a foreign company. So we have to pretend by using Eric Prince to make that. I mean, it's basically what they discuss. I don't think I have much highlighted here. The point was, again, just the idea that Comframe was a company designed to do just that. And so you have this situation where back then he was being used in the same way. Now you've got plenty of other examples, but guess what? Eric Prince is right back at it. I already showed you this, I think. Blackwater founder Eric Prince launched a company selling air defense by subscription. That's all what this comes down to, like defense by subscription, drone by subscription. They're all doing that. They're privatizing everything because that's the new CEO run country direction. But it says subscription to protect data centers, military bases with his Vectis air defense system. It's an autonomous drone dynamic. It's what we've all been worried about, every dystopian movie. And he's building this out. And guess what? It's called Swarmer. 2026, the founder of the American private military company Blackwater, Eric Prince, has created a company that will offer air defense by subscription. Right, Axios, of course. Always got the inside from the Israeli information. But what I found most revealing, Vectis air defense system will integrate best-in-class, battle-tested technologies from the United States, Ukraine, Israel, and other allied nations. Now, of course, there's three names there, right? Well, one of which is completely infiltrated and being controlled by Israel, and the other one is a collaboration of both the U.S. and Israel manipulating Ukraine for the longest of times. So doesn't mean it's all necessarily Israel or whatever else, but what I find most interesting, both Eric Prince and plenty of other examples, and Trump's other companies have turned out to be made in Israel. His whole unplugged phone got completely broken down to be made in Israel. In fact, I should grab that example. See if I can get it to pop up. Oops. Oh, I misspelled that. I'm sure I'll get it from that. Is right here. Oh. I guess they don't list it in this one. The Intercept example. Here it is. Oh, no. Come on. Let me find this real quick. The newer one shows this is not all it's cracked up to be or something. Hold on a second. It's going to frustrate me. Should have grabbed this, actually. Here it is. There it is. Funny how the rest of them don't mention that, but Eric Prince wants you to sell you a secure smartphone that's too good to be true. Well, guess what? Remember, this was 2022, guys, with all we've been talking about. Well, and I reported this at the time, but it's much more relevant for what we were talking about today. Unplugged day-to-day technology was called Unplugged. Our operations are run by Aaron Karpin, a former employee of Communitake, another name to remember for this very purpose, the Israeli startup that gave rise to the now infamous Hacker for Hire group, NSO group. He's literally building a phone with with Israeli spyware groups. That's why it just dropped it and moved on, because people like us called it out. He was selling you this as an America MAGA guys. He's lying. He got caught and just moved on. And of course, all the America First fake MAGA people out there blindly supporting Trump no matter what failed to call it out. So now that he's doing this again, my point is he's making a company with the new direction, and which of course will be about absorbing data and biometrics like everything else they're doing, but they're using specifically US, Ukraine, and Israeli tech to make this happen. So I want to highlight for you two things. It goes way back further than this, actually. I think I only grabbed the one to make it quick today. Brevity. But the point is that going back to 2021, 2022, Israel's been immersed with, well before that, especially if you understand the Azov movement connection I've talked about forever, and Israel and the United States funding and manipulating them since, going back to CIA goes back to 1949, if I remember correctly. Cultivating fascism in Ukraine is the point. But here you have the example of Israel literally working with Ukraine on their drone technology to foster cooperation and exchange expertise. So when you have Eric Prince, yet again, making a company that he'll seed into the United States, it literally ends up being Israeli tech. That's what we're talking about. Because the United States is a party of this, but you have Ukraine, Israeli tech that they're using, if you really read into this, and that's Israel tech, if you look at Ukraine's tech. And so now you have another example of another company that is basically it's a U.S. company that's basically seeding us with Israeli tech. Now, just to be clear, for all we know, it could just be benign. Maybe it's just drones. Well, in and of itself, it's not benign, but it should be something we concern ourselves with everything we're talking about, right? Obviously, that just seems insane to me. And it's just one after another, guys, one after another. Now, just to finish up, I'll include all these articles for you that we've talked about over the years, as Derek called us out in 2024 about meeting the spyware companies, preparing to unleash. Think about how prescient this was. We didn't know exactly where it was going to go, but Bold End, Cellbrite, Clearview AI, all of these companies that are so clearly relevant, NSO Group, Pegasus, all of it. We talked, and this was the next year, basically, Israeli spyware firm NSO found liable for hacks, journalists, civilians. Trump releasing that White House app that we don't talk about anymore that was quite literally directly connected to Israeli spyware. The same thing. Why don't we talk about that? Obvious reasons, guys. Intellexa, smartphones worldwide silently infected with Israeli spyware. And these are all directly connected to Israeli intelligence. The same stuff. And yet Trump's creating it's sort of like the quantum conversation, where we're leaning into quantum to make sure we secure ourselves, except the problem is the main entity you want to secure yourselves from is already inside Israel. Derek recently wrote about this on August 19th. Peter Thiel-funded company Anduril to triple the number of autonomous surveillance drone towers along the border. So with what we understand about this tech and all the different, I mean, Anduril particularly, but Flock and all the rest, as I've shown you, direct connections to this. So the surveillance, the spyware, it's all, I mean, and again, whether you think the Israeli part, like if that's more relevant or it's just another entity looking at you, it's still about this massive control grid building around you. I don't know how we can deny that at this point. Oracle and the rise of the AI surveillance state under Trump, 2026, all the different elements are playing their role, guys. I'll also include Derek's 3-part series simply called the Technocratic Trump Administration. Now, just to end in general, I want to include this, and I'm probably going to talk about this more in depth just because it'll probably come up again as this gets more relevant. But we've been talking about Honduras and just the network state agenda for a while. This was called Honduras Gate. I still can't believe nobody talked about this. It's a huge and very well fleshed out and sourced, basically leaked information proving that they manipulated Juan Orlando Hernandez's election for their benefit to be able to control Hernandez, arguably for the network state agenda. I mean, it's not even secret. People like Roger Stone and Trump's agenda. I mean, Roger Stone publicly on his Substack stated that this in Honduras, Prospera, is a freedom city and it's their starter model. I mean, it's all on the surface. I make these arguments and I get called a conspiracy theorist and they're out there bragging about it. I'm not even going to get into the horrifying things we're talking about in this fake libertarian direction where they're trying to trick anarchists and libertarians into thinking what they're doing here is in your interest. Guys, this is the CEO authoritarian run dynamic that they're actually doing. It's all very clear. Anyway, I'm not going to get into it now for the point of to finish this up. But ultimately, this, Ben Norton just put out, or actually this guy put it out, Marlon, there is nothing hidden between heaven and earth. The point is, the voice of Fernando Cremito, advisor to the National Party, appears in these audios that he delivered to the Attorney General on December 23rd, 2025. He identifies himself by stating that they stuffed votes in favor of Asfara. That's the other side, if you will. Now, just as Ben writes, a former electoral counselor in Honduras has published leaked recordings, that's in addition to the Honduras Gate discussions, which you should listen to, proving his country's 2025 election was stolen. The U.S. helped put in power a far-right politician, this is Tito Asfura, who is closely linked to drug trafficking. Trump personally interfered in Honduras' election, and he pardoned and released from prison the country's former U.S.-backed dictator, Juan Orlando Hernandez. Oh, excuse me, I said his election, but he was the one. But the point is, I believe he is going to be in power next in that country. Mark my words. Who was imprisoned for trafficking tons of cocaine and machine guns. JOH is from the same right-wing National Party as Asfura. His drug cartel buddies are now running Honduras once again with Washington's full support. Think about how insulting that is, what Trump's doing, killing people in the ocean, pretending they're drug trafficking. The fraud in Honduras was overseen by the U.S.-backed far-right Argentine specialist in election meddling, Fernando Cremito, who was recently arrested in Bolivia for hiring hitmen to try to assassinate his pregnant ex-girlfriend. This close U.S. ally is also being investigated for drug trafficking. He says, I repeat, the U.S. empire's most obedient allies, puppets in Latin America, are drug traffickers and criminals. Now, sadly, of course, he leaves out one of the most important parts in this, which is not even secret. It's not an opinion. Netanyahu and the rest are on these tapes. Like this is about Israel using all of this to manipulate, with both of them, really. But if you listen to this, it's very clear, as I titled it, Honduras Gate and the technocratic takeover of South America. And you could argue it's Israel using their technocratic agenda to gain more land, or it doesn't. At the end of the day, it's them manipulating public opinion, manipulating the election to take control of this location. I mean, you might as well just call the entire network state agenda the ongoing growth of Zionism, the colonialism of just seizing land for their political agenda, their ideological prophetic agenda, however you want to look at it. So what I want to highlight here is that there's another example that they not only manipulated the election, but they stole this country. That's what they're doing everywhere, guys. And that what I'm getting at is that what we're seeing today, not just the spyware, but the larger direction of how they're doing this is happening all around the world to varying degrees. The U.S., far more than other places, it seems, but it's happening. And it's worth noticing that this is not some small thing. This is some kind of gradual transition that we are starting to see very rapidly. The technocratic regime change. Under the guise of freedom, technocrats are slowly taking control. That's about Prospera when I first kind of discovered this. It's only become more relevant as this goes forward. Trump and the Zionist, globalist technocrats are building your new society, whether you like it or not. I'm hoping we're starting to see how clear that is right now. It's not even conspiratorial. They're literally telling you they're doing it. The network state coup and the engineered transition to what they literally do, in fact, call tech Zionism. It's in their book, guys. So what you can see this as some kind of land grab kind of growth. It's exactly what Zionism is doing in Gaza, in Lebanon. Maybe you call it, maybe just this is a different narrative, maybe. So we'll leave it there for the day, guys. Thank you for tuning in. I find this stuff to be very relevant as this gets worse and worse and it continues to grow. But just understanding what we really deal with. I mean, as we see the flock cameras and everything else continue to pop up and grow, whether it's Axon Flock, Vigilant Solutions, Genetech, it's all the same thing. All of it we should be fighting. And clearly it's, I mean, whether it's Flock and the algorithm specialist or Leonardo and the 30 different people from Israeli intelligence that work there, or SITE, or any number of these companies they're using to do all this stuff, it's packed, guys. And whether you don't care, whether you care about Israel or not, it's illegal surveillance. It's unconstitutional. What they're doing is wrong. And we all know that. And so there's different narratives about why you shouldn't care for right now because of this agenda, because of this narrative and this need and this problem. But that's not how it's supposed to work. We don't break the Constitution to fix the Constitution, guys. That's not even functionally possible. You choose to ignore those rights if you want to take advantage of the situation. That's what our government does every day. They're inalienable. Now, maybe you don't believe that should be the case. That's fine too. Have a conversation about it. But the point comes down to the fact that Americans don't want this. We all must see that by now, and they're doing it anyway. So do something about it. Never advocating for violence, but it's damn well time to do something, guys, because it's being shoved down our throats. Thank you for tuning in. I love you all. As always, question everything. Come to your own conclusions. Stay vigilant.